unfaithful wife that I still have trust issues with will probably contact her AP soon despite agreeing to no contact and the consequence of divorce. We're both in our 30s at the time of writing this article. More than 3 decades had elapsed since we first met, since high school. We have 2 children who are now in their adolescent years. The majority of the previous 15 years, my wife has been a stay-at-home parent, by choice, while I have worked hard in a demanding but well-paying career to provide for the needs of our family. Our family went through the horrible ordeal of losing one of our children a couple of years ago, and we were both devastated. We were in a state of shock. During this time, my wife grieved much more than I did. I tried to be a rock for her and our other children. She sought grief counseling, but found it to be of little use. As a result of our loss, she exhibited erratic behavior, and our marriage gradually started to crumble. We had a big drunken fight around 2 years ago, during which I said very hurtful things and called her names, but she didn't say anything back to me, no physical abuse. The fact that I was obtuse and immature was compounded by the fact that I did not show sorrow for my outburst, which resulted in a quiet bedroom and little contact with my friends as a result of my circumstances. I turned to drink, which resulted in my being sad. I was really contemplating divorcing my spouse about this time last year, which was around this time. I really want things to improve between us, but I've come to realize that in order for that to happen, we both have to change. I proposed that we seek marital counseling as a final resort as a last-ditch effort. She declined, but I had IC. Because of the abundance of physical activities I participated in, I was able to quit drinking, lose weight, and get into the greatest physical form of my life. My psychological well-being, as well as my attitude toward my wife, have both improved as a result of this experience. We were both happy. We had just recently begun to have relations with one another again, and our marriage seemed to be on the mend as a result. Consequently, things were beginning to look good again until I unintentionally found her extramarital affair. It's clear that there were several red flags, but I never doubted her and felt she would never violate my confidence. In the process of snooping around, I confronted her with some of the material I had gathered from various other sources. For the most part, I was informed that there had been no affair, and I was only given parts of information. For example, she claimed to me that she had only kissed her AP a few times, but her story was full with falsehoods. Her astonishment was completely taken by surprise as a result of our encounter and my following queries. My evidence of their progressing beyond kissing was ready and waiting for her when she acknowledged to having unprotected contact with the AP on numerous occasions the following day. It was all over now, however, since he had put a stop to it. In the next year, after our epic drunken fight the year before, we started having encounters with one another. In one of her most famous quotes, she said, "I still loved you, but I wasn't in love with you," which became well known. She recently informed me that, as a consequence of our disagreements, she has come to feel that I no longer love her as a result of our relationship. Despite our issues, however, this was not the case. I still valued her, as she would have discovered if we had spoken and she had inquired. As soon as my wife admitted her guilt, I took her phone away from her. Her email and social media app credentials were supplied to me by her, along with her username and password. However, even though there were definitely gaps in conversations that were erased shortly before her revelation of the physical affair, I had a very decent understanding of the general story by this point. After my wife's phone died, I messaged the AP to obtain his version of the story and to warn him that he would be in danger if he continued to meet with my wife the following day. The next day, I got an answer. It was virtually similar to his recall of the events that my wife had. As a result, he had terminated the physical affair due to the grief it would bring to both families, and since he chose a life with his BS over a life with he had decided to terminate the physical affair. He told me that my wife was a great person and that she had fallen in love with him, and it was at that point that he decided to call it quits since things had become too serious for him. The man expressed his sorry to me in person and promised to inform his wife about what had happened as a consequence of his decisions. In the end, I told him that it was his choice since I didn't want anybody else to have to go through what I had gone through. He agreed. I told him that if he ever came across my wife again, I would alert her right away and have him arrested. In spite of the fact that my primary goal was to put keylogger software on my wife's phone, I did not instruct him to discontinue contact with her. It's important to remember that we were in the midst of an emergency lockdown at the time, which meant that they couldn't see or contact with one another. They would talk to one another for many weeks to come. They were best friends. Her AP was notified by my wife, who informed them that I was aware of their presence. Even when I contacted him, the AP didn't get a notification that I had done so. Given that they were now bickering and blaming one another for their affair, it was amusing to see it all unfold on the TV. The same time that I was yelling at her for manipulating and treating me brutally in an effort to rescue our marriage or save her from being kicked out of our home, she started sending me love bombs. I was attempting to keep her from being evicted from our house at the time. Despite the fact that they were not meant to meet, she indicated her desire for them to do so in order to talk about what had occurred. She seemed to be regretful for how much her acts had harmed me, and she expressed sorrow for what she had done to cause me harm. She confessed to me that she had been too preoccupied with her own needs. In response to my inquiry as to whether she had ever cheated on me before, she answered with a little twist, stating that it was her first and only relationship. I am now suspicious she had a one-night stand with a former boyfriend many years ago, but I have no proof. It was she who said that I had recovered her love as a consequence of my good development. Because actions speak louder than words, it is important to remember that you should never trust anything a cheat says. At this time, she was still sending him messages, but they were benign conversations about things they had in common, which was how they initially met and became friends in the first place. To better understand my alternatives and how things might play out in the event of a divorce, I met with an attorney to go through them. When I overheard part of the talk, it seemed to startle my wife out of her hypnotic trance. I received a final message from my wife, in which she informed the AP that she would no longer be speaking with him and that he was not to contact her again in the future. Immediately after the cessation of communication between them, I set certain limitations on her and warned her of the repercussions if she violated the conditions of the restrictions. In accordance with one of the restrictions, I was not permitted to communicate with or see the AP again, and she was required to notify me immediately if he attempted to contact her. My wife was advised that if she did not adhere to the rules, I would divorce her. This was something on which both she and I agreed unanimously. His advice was that she needed to concentrate on herself and determine why she had behaved in such a reckless manner as she had. Despite stating that she intended to go, and claiming to be under obligation, the lady only went twice before claiming that she had already comprehended the reasons for her affair and did not need any more counseling services. A dozen trips later, I was finally able to see the same therapist, and despite the fact that client confidentiality had been broken, my therapist told me that my wife had shown regret. In this case, it happened a couple of months ago. Compared to previous relationships, my wife and I are getting along better than we have ever done. Despite my admiration for her, I have not forgiven her for what transpired. The two of them have not spoken with each other, but I have reason to believe this will change in the near future. The following questions come to mind after taking into consideration all of the material. What I'm wondering is if there is anybody out there who feels my wife has a chance to rehabilitate herself and be devoted to me, or whether I should simply go away and hide. Should I file for divorce on the basis that she has violated the no-contact rule if she contacts the AP again, as I think she would, even if it is to discuss anything small, on the grounds that she has broken the no-contact agreement? If divorce is out of the question, there are other solutions available. Anything further that she or I can do in order for us to have an enjoyable get-together would be really appreciated.